So I'm here because we're gathered here this week at PorcFest, and we've got some of the best minds looking forward into the future of freedom. But it is also a testament to just how much freedom we already enjoy here in these United States of America, and especially New Hampshire. And looking into the future, we can only be accurate in that if we have a solid grasp of the past. And so it's worth asking, how on earth did this sole solitary bastion of freedom come to be in a world full of tyranny, savagery, and sometimes both? And of course, in broad strokes, we used to be a bunch of British colonies. There was a war, and Britain had to recognize our independence. And the reasons for that war are spelled out in the Declaration of Independence. It's one of the few aspects of our heritage that is still popularly celebrated every July 4th. Don't get me wrong, it's a great piece of paperwork. More people should read it cover to cover, but it is just that, paperwork. It was only worth the paper it was written on because that war had already begun. And wars don't just start all by themselves, just like a bunch of firewood doesn't catch fire all by itself. You need a spark. And this war was no different. On one particular day, the people of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and the rest of the 13 colonies woke up as Englishmen, and some stuff happened. And by the time we all went to sleep, we were Americans. That must have been a heck of a day. People who participated in it thought so too. They wrote some stuff down. History knows exactly where and approximately when the war became irrevocable. Wow, imagine that. You know the own contents of your nation's birth certificate. That's basic data that you'd think every school child should know, right? But I'm guessing most of you don't. It wasn't Lexington, it wasn't Concord, though those events did happen on the same day. But by the end of this talk, you will know. So, if I could have the map, please. Excellent. So this day in question was April 19th, 1775. At this time, as you can see, Boston is an island. The Back Bay is really a bay, not just a quaint neighborhood. And tensions have been building for almost a decade between us and the king. He sent 2,000 soldiers to Boston to occupy it, and they shut down the Massachusetts colonial government and installed the commander of those troops, a General Thomas Gage, as the colonial governor. And as tensions have been building, General Gage has realized that gun control has got to be one of his top priorities. And so over the past few months, he's made a number of attempts to take our arms and ammunition away from us. Now, the arms of the day are single-shot, muzzle-loaded, smooth-bore firearms, commonly called muskets. They use black powder. Black powder is highly combustible, and if you cook by an open fire and read by candlelight, you don't store a lot of it in your house. You store most of it co-located with other townspeople in a separate powder house. So it's real easy for a bunch of soldiers to sneak in at the crack of daylight and tiptoe in and make off with all of the gunpowder out of the powder house. They did that once, and ever since then, there's been a sort of a spy game going back and forth between our guys, the Sons of Liberty, and the military, our own military. And April 19th is no different. We've known for several weeks that the next target to raid is going to be Concord. We just don't know when. And it is with that information that a certain silversmith that you may already know, Paul Revere, has gone out at midnight, is borrowing the fastest horse in the county, in order to get the word to Concord so that they'll be ready. They won't be taken by surprise. Now, Paul Revere has to make a few sudden turns to avoid the other side of the spy game, a bunch of army patrols out on the road looking to stop anyone traveling on the roads at night, imposing a curfew. But it doesn't matter what exact route Paul Revere takes, because at every town, he knows one person. And if you are that person, you're going to get a knock on your door at 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning, and yet you answer it, and there he is, the man, myth, the legend. He tells you what's going on, and maybe you're the captain of the militia. And so you go knocking door to door on all of your junior officers, waking up the entire town's militia. Maybe you're the church minister, so you send someone up the bell tower to ring the bell. Now that'll wake up the militia. And maybe your brother's got the fastest horse in town. You send him off in a perpendicular direction to Paul Revere's path to spread the news. So this information spreads recursively in all directions, sort of like an 18th century phone tree. Except we don't have any phones, no Facebook, no Twitter, no telegrams. So in any case, town by town, Paul Revere finally makes it to Lexington, which is the first big town on the route. In Lexington, the point of contact is a Captain Jonathan Parker. Now, if there's any one person in this story who's got every right to call in sick today, it's Jonathan Parker. He's got a fatal case of tuberculosis. His voice is severely weakened. Nonetheless, he responds to the news, musters up the militia. After about an hour or so, Paul Revere meets up with another rider coming into town, William Dawes. He took a slightly different route down south. He went on a slower horse. So Dawes and Revere proceed out of Lexington. And in the meantime, all this time, where on earth are the redcoats? In a word, they're late. That's what tends to happen when you've got about 10 different regiments of foot, and instead of saying, well, I want 800 men, so let's take the first 3 regiments and send them out, instead you go through and you cherry pick all of the grenadiers and light infantry out of each regiment. A bunch of guys who have never worked with each other before are learning how to do that on short notice. And then the whole Army-Navy rivalry comes in. The Navy doesn't provide them enough rowboats to make it across the bay in one trip. They have to take 2 trips, then a third for the provisions. And, of course, the Navy gives the Army the best of the best. Right? Wrong. They discard that. And so it is 2 a.m. when the commander of that detachment, a Colonel Francis Smith, marches his 800 men out of the swamp called Lechmere Point towards Concord. And as they go, they can hear the results of Paul Revere's phone tree. There's church bells going off, warning volleys of muskets going off, some signal fires, even some shadowy figures in the distance who are half walking, half running, parallel to the troops towards Concord. Of course, none of the troops or officers actually know the full details of the mission. There's that spy game again. Only Colonel Smith really knows his orders. So back in Lexington, this is taking quite some time, and Captain Parker's got about 100 men assembled on the green just standing around, and there have been false alarms before. So Captain Parker decides to send a couple of scouts down the road on horseback. And they don't return because horse hooves are very loud and they get captured. So after a short while, Captain Parker dismisses his men, tells them to stay within reach of the muster drum. And a lot of them live far away, and they're cold, it's dark, they're miserable. So they head into a nearby tavern. Buckman's Tavern right there. Of course, before they do that, they have to unload their muskets. And, a muzzle-loading firearm, how do you safely unload that? Yeah, you've got to shoot it. They've gone through all the pain of being woken up in the middle of the night, so they let off with a full volley into the air. So, meanwhile, on the road with Paul Revere and Dawes, after a couple of towns, they run into another rider. And this gentleman turns out to be Dr. Samuel Prescott. Now, if you need the best horseman in this day, find the doctor. He's got to make a house call. So there's no such thing as an ambulance yet. And so Prescott also happens to be a high son of liberty, as they are called. So Revere asks him to join, tells him what's going on, asks him to join the mission. Oh, yes, I'm from Concord. They'll trust me more than they'll trust you. He agrees. A couple of towns after that, they spot another one of those army patrols on the road, and they decide to take it on, but then a bunch more soldiers pop out of the bushes. It's an ambush. The three are captured. Suddenly, though, Prescott sees an opening. He tells everyone, "Put on," and he jumps over a stone wall, disappears into the night. Dawes goes the other way, gets thrown from his horse. He's done for the night. Revere takes a wrong turn and gets recaptured. So in the end, Dr. Samuel Prescott is the only one who's actually going to make it to Concord with that news. If you ask me, I think he ought to get a lot more credit than he does. Finally, as day breaks, though, back in Lexington, Captain Parker decides to send just one more scout. Within minutes, the scout returns. Oh yes, the redcoats are out. There's hundreds of them, and they're maybe a quarter mile back there. So Captain Parker hastily orders the muster call. Takes another head count of the men that respond. He's got about 75, 77. And at the front of these redcoats is a brash young Irish lieutenant, Jesse Adair, and he sees a fork in the road. If he'd known he was going to Concord, he might have made the decision to go left towards Concord. Regardless, though, he doesn't want to leave this militia, this bunch of armed folks with no uniforms, just standing at his flank. So he leads the force directly onto the green. The officers on horseback begin riding back and forth, and they yell out the militia some very quaint insults and order the militia to disperse and throw down their arms. Captain Parker can count. He sees that he's vastly outnumbered. He's made his point. So he tells his militiamen, disperse, but keep your arms. And as the militia begin walking back home, a shot rings out. We don't know who fired that one shot. Could have been a pistol or a flash in the pan. What we do know is that one of the British soldiers, took that as the fire command and proceeded to fire into the fleeing militia. And one by one, other soldiers followed suit until the entire group, a lot of them, had fired a ragged volley without orders. They then proceeded to follow their world-class training, reload as fast as they can, fire again, then fix bayonets and charge. So they proceed to chase militiamen to their houses, around the buildings. A number of our guys get shot in the back, bayoneted. It's pandemonium. About this time, Colonel Smith finally makes his way onto the green, and he is horrified. The whole point of his mission, to disarm us, was so that they wouldn't have to use violent force, lethal force against us. But Colonel Smith knows exactly what to do. He gets his nearest drummer and orders him to beat the assembly And once again, well-trained soldiers slowly begin to recognize that drumbeat and return to the source, and they form back up on Colonel Smith. Colonel Smith doesn't want this to happen again, and he worries that some of his troops might still have loaded muskets. So, the quickest way to get a bunch of dullards to empty their muskets is to order a victory volley. 3 cheers of huzzah. And that's exactly what he does. Meanwhile, on the green, our own troops have killed 8 of us and wounded 10. And there were 8 pairs of father and son that day, of which 5 were severed by death. So as we're patching up the wounded and mourning the dead, our own soldiers fire a victory volley, give 3 cheers of huzzah, and march down the road without another word. If I'd seen that, I'm not sure what I would have called it. But in history, we like to call that the first strike of the match. The metaphor is one of those old kitchen matches, a little bit unreliable. You strike it once, all you get is a spark, tiny spark. Strike it again, it flickers, then dies out. Only on a third strike do you get a lasting flame that you can use to light a fire. And such is the metaphor here. If Colonel Smith, because Colonel Smith had a choice to make. He could have simply proceeded back to Boston. After all, this was all supposed to be a surprise theft of arms and ammunition from us. And yet, the sun is already up, and they've done battle. But Colonel Smith was selected not for his intelligence, but his loyalty. He has his orders, and by golly, he's going to follow them. So he marches his men down the road. So meanwhile, back in Concord, Dr. Prescott got the word to them, but he keeps going down the road. The next town is Acton. And in Acton, the leader of the Minute Company is a man about my age named Isaac Davis. And as Dr. Prescott rides up to the house, he realizes that the lights are on, even though it's the middle of the night. Turns out that Captain Davis's 4 children are all sick with what they call the canker rash. We know it as scarlet fever. We treat it with antibiotics. Those don't exist in the 18th century. Life or death with this is a coin flip. Nonetheless, Captain Davis decides that he is indeed going to join whatever this is going to turn out to be, rather than sending his top lieutenant. So he gathers his musket, his bayonet, his cartridge box. The Acton Minutemen are perhaps the most well-equipped, well-trained militia company in the county, because Isaac Davis is not just a farmer, he's also a gunsmith. He gathers his equipment, and as he gets ready to walk out his front door, he turns around to his wife, Hannah. Pauses for a moment, trying to think, as if he's trying to think of something profound to say. But all he says is, "Take good care of the children." And he walks out his front door, marches down the road to Concord with his men. And in Concord, there's 3 schools of thought as to what to do. The young, brash Minutemen want to go down the road, confront the army. The middle-aged folks want to stand their ground in the town, defend it. The older guys, who maybe were veterans of a certain war that happened a couple decades ago, they know that fighting in the town is not a good idea, and that they know that some elevation and distance will be useful, both of which can be found on the training ground to the northwest at Punkatasset Hill. So the Minutemen go down the road, and they soon see that the road is occupied by, in the distance, what looks like a giant red snake with silvery scales. Those are the bayonets, and they're polished to a shine, and they're really shiny with the early morning sunlight. These Minutemen can count. They can see they're outnumbered. And so in an orderly fashion, they march back into town. They link back up with the middle-aged guys. They count again. They can still count. They're still outnumbered. And so all the militia end up on Punkatasset Hill. Colonel Smith marches his men into Concord, finds it devoid of militia. So he splits up his forces. He has the grenadiers searching the town, and he sends one company of his light infantry to the South Bridge, which is the choke point to the southwest, and then 3 more companies to the North Bridge, the other choke point to the northwest. Now, the grenadiers searching the town don't find a whole bunch because while the militia was busy arguing, the women and children were busy carrying arms and ammunition out of town, and or at least hiding them in some way. The one thing they couldn't hide was a couple of 3 cannon that were buried behind the tavern. Colonel Smith's second in command, Major Pitcairn, has to use some force to coerce the tavern keeper to tell him where the cannon are. What they do, dig the cannon up and knock the trunnions off, basically making them useless. They find the wagon wheels for the gun carts for those same cannon, some wooden cutlery and plates, and also they find the town's Liberty pole. Think of it as an 18th century Facebook. Anyone can just nail up advertisements and pamphlets and whatnot. It's sort of a monument to our way of life in the colonies, with the king being far away. They chop that down, add it to this growing pile of combustibles, and they set it on fire. They've done so far too close to the town hall, and so the wind picks up some embers and sets the town hall on fire. Soldiers didn't mean to do that, so the women of the town shamed the soldiers into joining the bucket brigade. And so they start trying to put this fire out. It's a big fire, and so they quickly create a whole bunch of steam and smoke. Up on the hill, the smoke is all that our guys can see. It looks to them very suspiciously as though these soldiers are burning the town down. That's going to be a really annoying homeowners insurance claim. The government burned my house down, except that to a first approximation, homeowners insurance does not exist in 1775. If your home burns down, you got to rebuild all of that capital yourself. Tough luck. So a young lieutenant, Joseph Hosmer, walks up to the commander of all of the militia gathered there, Colonel Barrett, and asks, "We stand here and let them burn our homes?" And Colonel Barrett thinks for a moment, says, "No, we won't." Looks around at all of the militia companies gathered, sees the Acton Minutemen, and under Isaac Davis. They're the best equipped, so he asks Captain Davis to be the vanguard, to which Captain Davis draws his saber, and he says, "I have not a man who is afraid to go." So they begin marching down the hill. At this point, there are about 600 of our guys. We're marching in a fairly precision manner. It looks like we know what we're doing. So the redcoat officer, the army officer who is guarding the North Bridge, Captain Laurie, sees this, and he's a little intimidated. He's, in addition to us being surprisingly well-trained, he also sees that he's outnumbered 2-1. So he orders all of the troops back to the townward side of the bridge. Then he gets the bright idea, well, if those rabble really want to engage us, they're going to have to cross the bridge. So he orders some planks pulled up from the bridge. And he also orders his men into what he called a street fighting formation, which is very narrow, 3 ranks, and it concentrates firepower in one direction, in this case, over the bridge. Except our guys have got a little bit of a better idea. It's the only thing between us and them is a riverbank, and so Colonel Barrett tells us to spread out along our side of the riverbank. But before we do, though, he reminds our guys of the standing orders of the day, which have been contemplated for many years. Do not fire unless fired upon. On the bridge, meanwhile, Captain Laurie did not pay good attention to the order of operations, and so as a result, he's got soldiers still trying to cross the bridge while planks are being pulled up and street fighting formations being set up. Causes a bit of a traffic jam. So as our guys are setting up along the riverbank, taking a knee, looking out at this chaos, we can see some of those red coats are a lot redder than others. The officers are the noblemen's sons, not firstborn, but they bought a commission, and they bought their own equipment. Those coats are the finest red coats that money can buy in England, and they're still just as red as the day they were made. But all of the other men under them, those are paupers from the streets of Dublin and whatnot. The king paid for their equipment, so he's cheap. Their coats have faded to a reddish brown. So it's really easy to tell who the officers are. But all of a sudden in the traffic jam, someone has a negligent discharge, and just like before, other men begin to fire without orders before Captain Laurie can gather his wits and order to the contrary. Now, a flintlock musket, the way that the ignition starts is with quite literally a flash in the pan. That's where that expression came from. So if you're well trained in militaria but not in how to shoot straight with it, it is very easy to see that giant flash right in front of your face and flinch. The redcoat's first volley misses high. It almost always does. This one's no exception. But not all of the shots are together with that volley. Isaac Davis is shot in the heart, killed instantly. And a young private next to him, Abner Hosmer, is shot in the head. Now, since we're spread out along the riverbank, not all of us can see what happened. But one of the men whose blood is stained from Isaac Davis is our second in command, Major Buttrick, and he quickly gives the order, "Fire, fellow soldiers, for God's sake, fire. Fire as fast as you can." Well, our first volley takes out about half of those officers. It's really easy to see where they are. Musket balls start flying back and forth. After about the 1 minute mark, we are having trouble finding any more officers to take aim at. And about 2 minutes in, the soldiers see that they've got no officers, nobody to give them orders, and they're taking a whole bunch of accurate fire. They throw their muskets into the river and run for their lives back to Colonel Smith. History calls this the second strike of the match, for reasons obvious shortly. So after this, our guys set up on both sides of the bridge. And a few minutes later, in comes another company of British light infantry that was busy searching Barrett's farm to no effect. All of the muskets were hidden in the furrows of his field. And these soldiers have got a ghastly sight before them. Their fellow soldiers are dead and wounded on the ground, and above them stand a bunch of strangers armed with no uniforms. But in a stroke of wisdom, the officer in charge of those men decides to simply cross the bridge, don't engage these strange gentlemen, and sure enough, we let them pass. Because the standing order still remains, do not fire unless fired upon. So the war still isn't yet irrevocable. At this point, it's still conceivable that Colonel Smith could have gotten his men back home without any further incident. But for reasons that are lost to history, Colonel Smith, after receiving the gentlemen who were searching the farm, tarries for about an hour until he can finally see out in the distance a bunch of tiny little dots that are steadily growing bigger and bigger. Militiamen from all over Massachusetts converging on Concord to let him know that he's worn out his welcome. So, knowing this and knowing that there's going to be militiamen from Concord hot on his heels, he decides to march at a breakneck pace. He also sends out a couple of units to either side, flankers, in order to dissuade us from getting too close to the road from the side. And this works well for about a mile. You see, about a mile down the road, the road narrows, and over a small bridge crosses a small creek. The bridge and the road are at the edge of a farm owned by some folks called Merriam, which is why that spot is referred to as Merriam's Corner. It's a bottleneck. Colonel Smith has to pull in all of his flankers and send his men across single file, much more slowly than they were going before. So the men from Concord aren't slowing down. They're getting closer and closer and closer. Meanwhile, though, because the flankers are gone, a group of militia from Reading, Massachusetts, under the command of a major, I forgot the name. Group of militia from Reading approach the Merriam farmhouse and take cover alongside it in the outbuildings and the vegetation there. And so they've got a good position on these regulars that are crossing the bridge. And they can also see off to their right is a bunch of strangers from Concord. And all of a sudden, just as the vanguard is about to make the crossing, they present a volley at the men from Concord, and they miss high. But then the Major John Brooks is the officer in charge of the men from Reading. He decides to recognize that the men from Concord, despite being from a completely different part of Massachusetts, are his own countrymen, and that the soldiers there, his own soldiers, are something else. And so, without any provocation to himself, he gives the order, and as the newspapers later say, the Americans fire first. And history refers to this as the third strike of the match, because from here on, it is game on. At every geographic opportunity, every stone wall, every hill, every sharp bend in the road, there is another company of militiamen gathered, waiting in ambush for Colonel Smith's column to come into view, for them to present a volley of musket fire. And Colonel Smith's men have only brought cartridge boxes with 36 rounds of ammunition, and they're going 18 miles. So each of Colonel Smith's men can fire twice per mile. He's got to really conserve ammunition, so his preferred response is a bayonet charge. Results are mixed, but most of our guys can disperse and scatter before taking any serious casualties. And this continues down the road and down the road. The one of these that is notable, however, is a particular stone wall behind which waits not just any company of militia from some faraway town in Massachusetts responding to Paul Revere's news, but rather Captain Jonathan Parker of the Lexington militia. And Parker doesn't give the order to fire right when the front of the militia comes into view. He's waiting for one specific British officer in particular, and sure enough, they shoot Colonel Smith's horse and Colonel Smith in the thigh. He falls off his horse and has to be put in a cart with the rest of the wounded British officers. So now the Army force falls to the second in command, Major Pitcairn. For reasons unknown, Major Pitcairn decides to personally lead the bayonet charge at Fisk Hill, the very next one, during which time his horse gets spooked, throws him off the back, and gives him a nasty little bump on the head and a case of confusion. So he's out of action as well. So that now the command falls to the junior officers, and discipline starts to run ragged. For example, all of these soldiers brought just a little canteen of water about the size of this thing, and they've been at it for more than 12 hours. So that's running dry, and so they start running after various wells. Fights break out at each individual well in many cases. At one point, the vanguard, instead of marching, decides that they're just going to run down the road as fast as they can, to which the junior officers have to grab some muskets, sprint ahead of them, line up across the road, and tell the soldiers, form up or we will shoot you ourselves. And that reluctantly gets them back into order. But by the time they get to Lexington, surrender seems inevitable. But all of a sudden, a cry of huzzah rings out from the front. Well, where did that come from? So, got to rewind a little bit. The previous evening, after General Gage had tasked Colonel Smith with these 800 men, he had second thoughts. Maybe those aren't enough to get the job done. I better send out everyone else with Lord Percy, it's another general. But bureaucratic delays happen, and so Percy doesn't get those orders until middle of the next morning. And so by basically by about 2 p.m. this day, Percy is just barely making it into Lexington when the remnants of Colonel Smith's command come straggling in. Percy's also got a couple of cannons, so he fires a warning shot, blasts one of the taverns into smithereens. That gets our guys to scatter, and buys him about an hour to let the exhausted men refresh themselves. At which point, Percy realizes that he's got the same ammunition problem that Colonel Smith did, because he left in such a hurry that his men have only got that one cartridge box. But Percy is a little bit more intelligent. He decides to march at a more deliberate pace and use a roughly square-shaped formation. So he marches out at about 3 p.m., but lucky for us, we get a new commander on the field as well, an autodidact by the name of William Heath. Now, this gentleman is a portly, balding farmer. He's never been to a war college, but he hasn't even seen a day of battle at all. What he has been doing, though, is going into the tavern and picking the brains of the British officers there. What would you do if this happened? Or if this happened? Or if that happened? And so our previous strategy of volley fire isn't going to work very well, but Heath knows exactly what to do instead, and both he and Percy would independently come to call this the ring of fire. You can think of it as the opposite of a volley. A volley concentrates the firepower both in space and time, comes from one location and all at one time. By contrast, Heath is going to disperse the firepower in both space and time. The men leapfrog each other one at a time, and after they each one goes forward after he shoots. He gets to the new position, reloads. If you looked at it from the air, you might see a wave of musket fire slowly proceeding forward once every few seconds. And this means that every spot from which the regulars are taking fire, they're only going to take one shot, which is not enough to line up an entire volley of soldiers at, an entire volley of muskets at, because that's what the British Army does. Also not a big enough target for those cannons. And so we start to really debilitate them as they go on. But things take a more brutal turn in a town called Monotony. Today we call it Arlington. Back then it was the edge of developed urban area. And the houses are built about 10 yards away from the main road. The vanguard of Percy's vanguard sees this as an opportunity to walk into some of those houses and start looting some of the fine china and whatnot. We don't take kindly to that, and they don't take kindly to us disagreeing with them, so some close quarters fighting breaks out. Now, you remember how the old guys said it wasn't a good idea to fight inside of a town? Well, now we get to see why. The ring of fire is still there, but they're not going to shoot through other people's houses. So if you live on the main road in Monotony, there's, at any given time here, there's maybe a dozen, 2 dozen British soldiers in the shadow of your home, right in front of you, not 10 yards away, and they've all got bayonets. Most of the real fighting is done with the bayonet in this day and age. The fact that it can shoot is considered by military minds to be a happy accident, a little extra icing on the cake. Most colonists do not have the bayonet. All you have is one shot, and all that each of the perhaps 8 or 10 kin that live together in your house is one shot each. So firing at the soldiers from out of your window or your door is a death sentence. And yet it happens so frequently that at one point, after a certain point, one of Percy's junior officers has to give the order that if you take fire from a house, go into it, break down the door, kill every man, woman, and child inside, and burn it to the ground. At one point, just prior to that order being given, they took fire from a house owned by Jason Russell. He coined the phrase, an Englishman's home is his castle. Told that to one of his neighbors early that morning in answer to a question of why he wouldn't skip town and avoid all this trouble. Well, he and about a dozen of his family were found dead inside, and in one of the rooms, blood was pooled about ankle deep. And this continues into the next town. All of a sudden, though, a Tory spy arrives on horseback to General Percy, telling him that the bridge that he used, the Cambridge Bridge that he used to get to Lexington, has been destroyed irreparably. But there's another path that will get him to Charleston, where he will be in range of the guns of the British warship HMS Somerset. And so Percy makes a sudden left turn, and this disrupts the ring of fire. There's one last company of militia that had the opportunity to cut Percy off. From Salem, Massachusetts, led by Timothy Pickering. Thing is that Pickering is somewhat of a conservative. He once he's made up his mind about something, he gets it done well. and he's going to be our Secretary of War. But it might take him a while to make that decision. And today he's not really sure if he wants to join in the fighting, if fighting is the right answer yet. So he dillies and dallies. Finally, his men tell him, if you won't lead us, we're going without you. And so the Salem, Massachusetts militia arrives just in time to see the last of the Redcoats cross the Charleston Neck and to see the sunset. Now, the next morning, General Gage wakes up and he sees the shores of Massachusetts mainland are occupied by no fewer than 14,000 armed militiamen from all over New England. All of that with none of this magic glass in our pockets. 14,000. They say that some people say that how much society values liberty can be measured by how many people will show up to defend it when required. And imagine if you put yourself in Paul Revere's shoes. If you got news that something like this grand theft arms was going to happen, and you needed to get the word out, could you reach even 1,000 people? Show of hands? I'll make it easier. How about 100? Maybe 10? Handful of you. Wow. It's amazing how far we've come since then. That is, in a nutshell, is the story of April 19th, 1775. So now you know where this nation was born. Miriam's Corner. There's also there's something else. It's remarkable, though, the amount of preparation that went into all of this. The horse that was lent to Paul Revere, the people just dropping everything, and wow, there's the rain. It's people dropping their farm equipment and grabbing a musket and running to where this powder raid was going to happen. And this was no accident. The king had been tightening the screws for about a decade. Much of that is written in the Declaration of Independence. The thing about it is, though, there's a bit of a duality that John Adams wrote about. The Revolutionary War was 8 long years, but it ended, thank goodness. When it ended, we put it into the history books. That's done. But that sweeping change of opinion, that realization in the hearts and minds of the people that in order to conserve our way of life in the colonies, we had to be free and independent states. That's really the American Revolution. And, clearly it has ended. I mean, ask your neighbor what he thinks about the American Revolution. He's going to think you're crazy. But I don't think it was meant to end. And reigniting it is, some ways to reignite it, but the best way that I've found is to tell this story and others like it, one audience at a time. Project Appleseed is an organization that does precisely this all over the country. We are a nonprofit, 100% volunteer operated. But wait, there's more. So at the North Bridge in Concord, a whole bunch of farmers and tradespeople marched down a mountain with only a 2-to-1 numeric advantage against the world's finest fighting force of the time, the British Army. In one word, anyone want to shout it out, what advantage did we have that allowed us to prevail? Yes, you've been here before. Marksmanship. Marksmanship played a pivotal role. It made history on April 19th, 1775, and it was also key to many other parts of the rest of the Revolutionary War. And that is why Project Appleseed also teaches the fundamentals of rifle marksmanship. It takes the full 2 days of a weekend, Saturday and Sunday. We do this at various outdoor ranges, fish and game clubs, all across the country, I think in 47 out of 50 states. It's the same stuff that it takes about 2 weeks for U.S. Marines to learn in boot camp. So, I hope you enjoyed the story, and we hope to see you on the firing line. And at this point, I open it up to questions. Thank you for your time. Bunker Hill is located just south of, no, that's Winter Hill, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, the small cutout on the right. Bunker Hill is on the island Charleston, north of Boston. That was the very next battle of the Revolutionary War. Lexington and Concord and et cetera were the first. All right, seeing none. Thank you all for your time.